Thursday, the 28th of October, 2024. And I'm going to talk about what I said in chapter 6 of Gender and Development in Nigeria, part 12. Part 12 would focus on the historical and cultural underpinnings of gender inequality in Nigeria. So, what are the historical and cultural roots of discrimination against women in Nigerian society? I trace the roots of discrimination against women in Nigeria back to a complex interplay of pre-colonial societal structures, the transformative impact of colonialism, and the enduring legacy of patriarchal norms and practices that continue to shape contemporary Nigerian society. I highlight the need for a nuanced understanding of this historical and cultural context to fully grasp the complexity of gender inequality in Nigeria. So there are 8 factors that I discuss in terms of the historical and cultural roots. No, I discuss actually, I think 12 historical and cultural roots of discrimination against women in Nigerian society. So here's the first: pre-colonial gender roles. There's a complex picture concerning the pre-colonial gender roles of women. So I acknowledge the existence of male dominance in some pre-colonial Nigerian societies, but I challenge the notion that women were universally oppressed during this period. I emphasize that gender roles and expectations varied significantly across different communities and societies in what became Nigeria. For example, among some communities like the Oyo Yoruba, seniority played a more significant role than gender, and senior daughters had authority over junior brothers in family matters. Second factor is complementarity and autonomy. I suggest that many pre-colonial societies had a sexual division of labor that did not necessarily translate into women's exclusion from decision-making roles. The complementarity of male and female roles in areas such as agriculture, trade, and craft production often granted women a degree of economic autonomy and influence within their communities. Third, leadership roles. I point to historical evidence that women held leadership positions in politics, religion, and the economy in certain communities. This challenges the simplistic narrative that pre-colonial societies are uniformly patriarchal, and it highlights the diversity of gender relations that existed before the arrival of European colonizers. 4, colonialism's disruptive influence. I argue that colonialism had a profound and often negative impact on women's status and rights in Nigeria. Colonial policies and practices driven by European patriarchal ideologies disrupted existing social structures, and they imposed new forms of gender inequality that continue to resonate in contemporary Nigeria. 5, reinforcement of patriarchal structures. Colonial administrators often favored men in positions of authority, reinforcing existing patriarchal structures and undermining women's traditional leadership roles. The introduction of Western legal systems, while claiming to offer women more secure rights in marriage and divorce, often failed to benefit women in practice. Due to their unfamiliarity with the new legal codes and the financial costs associated with pursuing legal remedies. 6, imposition of Victorian values. I highlight how colonialism imposed Victorian values that emphasized the separation of men and women into distinct public and private spheres. This ideology relegated women to domestic roles and discouraged their participation in public life, further marginalizing them from political and economic power. 7, discriminatory education policies. Colonial education policies often prioritized the education of men, preparing them for leadership roles within the colonial administration, while limiting women's access to education and opportunities for social and economic advancement. 8, the spread of Christianity and Islam. So the spread of Christianity and Islam during the colonial era also had complex and often contradictory effects on women's status. While some Christian denominations provided women with opportunities to regain their pre-colonial status in religious leadership, Islam, as practiced in northern Nigeria, generally curtailed women's economic independence and excluded them from positions of power. Christianity also did a lot to impose patriarchal norms that domesticated women, that privileged men, and that exhort women to be submissive to the domination of their spouses. So both of these religions were not necessarily good for women's gender autonomy and gender rights. 9, the enduring legacy of patriarchy. I argue that despite the formal end of colonial rule, the legacy of patriarchal norms and practices continues to shape gender relations in Nigeria, contributing to ongoing discrimination against women. 10, persistence of discriminatory laws and practices. Many discriminatory administrative practices in contemporary Nigeria persist, such as the assumption that males are the heads of families, and they are rooted in colonial laws and governance structures. 11, intersectionality of gender and class. I emphasize that the intersectional nature of gender inequality in Nigeria is a significant factor because class, ethnicity, religion, and other cross-cutting elements in social life further compound the disadvantages faced by women, particularly those who are poor and vulnerable and marginalized. 12, the impact of structural adjustment programs, SAP. I point to the implementation of SAPs in the 1980s as a significant factor that exacerbated gender inequality in Nigeria. These neoliberal economic policies, characterized by austerity measures, privatization, and cuts to social services, disproportionately impacted women and reduced their employment opportunities and access to essential sources like healthcare and education. So altogether, I try to give a comprehensive analysis of the historical and cultural roots of discrimination against women in Nigeria. I emphasize the need to move beyond simplistic narratives and engage with the complexities of gender relations across different historical periods and social contexts. Understanding these historical and cultural underpinnings is crucial for developing effective strategies to address gender inequality and promote women's rights in contemporary Nigeria. So this is the end of part 12 of what I said in chapter 6 of Gender and Development in Nigeria.